Live from London, this is BBC News. One of the Conservative Party's big beasts, Michael Gove, says he's stepping down as an MP at the election. Also tonight, news that Andrea Leadsom, once a challenger for the Tory leadership, is also standing down in a mass exodus of MPs. The United Nations highest court orders Israel to halt its military operations in Rafah in Gaza. The former post office boss is accused of living in La La Land as hundreds of sub-postmasters caught up in the faulty IT scandal have their convictions for fraud quashed by Parliament.
Hello, I'm Adam Fleming, host of the BBC's daily news podcast, Newscast. You will shortly be able to see us recording today's episode, where we'll tell you everything you need to know from the campaign trail.
Hello, I'm Laura Trant with your news tonight. Two of the most recognisable names in Conservative Party politics in recent years have announced they won't be standing again at the general election. Late this evening, the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove announced he'd be stepping down as MP. He was followed by Dame Andrea Leadsom, who said she'd also be leaving politics. Michael Gove says he supports Rishi Sunak to return as Prime Minister, but it's time for a new generation to lead. In what appears to be a mass exodus overall, 1 in 5 MPs won't be running for office again on July the 4th, with more than 70 from the Conservatives and over 20 from Labour. 9 from the SNP are also standing down. Chris Mason has the latest from Westminster.
He's one of the most consequential, colourful and controversial political figures of the last few decades.
It's fantastic to be here with just 3 weeks to go before the referendum and the chance to take back our independence.
Michael Gove was a passionate advocate of Brexit, even if he did look a bit sheepish on the day the Leave campaign won.
As we move forward, we should be in no doubt that Britain is embarking on a new chapter, but one that is in line with our best traditions.
Sir Ian's sentiments are shared by most activists.
Mr Gove began his career as a journalist. Here he was reporting for the BBC on a Pride March in London 31 years ago.
So, what are the chances of a change in the law that makes young gay love a sex crime?
He became an MP in 2005 and was a close ally of David Cameron, at least until they fell out over Brexit. As a reforming education secretary, he made friends and not a few enemies, and he was a central figure in the psychodramas of the Conservative Party over the last 10 years. He managed to strangle Boris Johnson's first tilt at becoming Prime Minister.
I've realised that while Boris does have those very special abilities to communicate and to reach out, what he did not have was the capacity to build and to lead that team and to provide the leadership the country needs at this critical moment.
Mr Gove ran unsuccessfully for the top job himself in 2019.
I can confirm that I will be putting my name forward to be Prime Minister of this country.
And when Liz Truss was in the deepest of trouble as Prime Minister, Mr Gove ensured she was plunged deeper still.
The sheer risk of using borrowed money to fund tax cuts, that is not Conservative. To have as your principal decision the headline tax move, cutting tax for the wealthiest, that is a display of the wrong values.
But there's no such criticism of Rishi Sunak in his letter to his constituency chairman. He writes, "The chance to serve is wonderful, but there comes a moment when you know that it is time to leave, that a new generation should lead." He adds, "Rishi has the plan our country needs at a time of global insecurity and growing challenge. I will do everything I can to support him."
Who has been alongside me.
Today has been a day of departures here, human reflections and thanks from those standing down, including a former Prime Minister praising her husband.
Who has also been the person who was there when I was Prime Minister in the evenings when he needed to make the beans on toast and pour the whiskey when the day hadn't gone quite as well as I'd expected it to go, and that, of course, is my husband, Philip.
As Parliament wrapped up this evening, MPs queued up to shake hands with the Speaker. Who ends up here in 6 weeks' time is your call. Chris Mason, BBC News.
Sir Keir Starmer has been campaigning in Scotland, where he said children were paying the cost of SNP failures there and Conservative failures at Westminster. Scotland is seen as a key battleground with 57 seats up for grabs. That's 2 less than at the last election because of boundary changes. Both Labour and the Conservatives are hoping to capitalise on the Scottish National Party's recent troubles. From Glasgow, here's James Cook, our Scotland editor.
For half a century, Labour ruled the roost in Scotland. When Sir Keir Starmer was a boy, the party routinely sent dozens of MPs to Westminster. At the last general election, it sent 1.
I want Scotland to send a government, a Labour government.
That means persuading voters that Labour, not the SNP, can bring about real change.
You want to stick to Tory spending plans. You too want limits on immigration to bring it down, and you want to stick to some Tory welfare plans. Aren't you just a Tory in disguise?
What's unforgivable in politics for any political party is to leave your country worse than when you found it. A worse economy, worse public services, everybody feeling that they're not as well off as they were 14 years ago. That is unforgivable. I'm not prepared to have a Labour government come in and cause that sort of pain and suffering for working people. Hence the stability that only Labour can now provide.
The switch in support from Labour to the SNP a decade ago was driven in part by a desire among many voters here in Glasgow for Scotland to become independent. Now, that hasn't disappeared, but the question is, will it be a priority for voters in this election?
Kate Forbes hopes it will. Scotland's newly minted Deputy First Minister has been campaigning on a croft in Inverness-shire.
We represent farmers, crofters, people who make their living in rural industries, and all of them lament the impact of Brexit on food and drink exports, the impact of the cost of living, for example, on energy, and that's why we need SNP representatives to stand up for rural Scotland.
The Conservatives are also bidding for the rural vote. They have 6 Scottish MPs in the North East and the south of Scotland.
If people want the focus of their MP to be on their local priorities rather than independence, they can unite behind the Scottish Conservatives to send that very strong signal to the SNP to end their obsession with separating Scotland from the rest of the UK.
On the streets of Edinburgh, the Lib Dems were focusing on the health service.
The SNP have let our NHS crumble. That's why Lib Dems in this election campaign want to improve world-class mental health services by taxing the social media giants who do so much of the harm and reducing that burden on our local GP practices.
This campaign journey is only just beginning. Voters, not politicians, will choose where it ends. But right now it's Labour who are hopeful of restoring their old Scottish heritage. James Cook, BBC News, Glasgow.
The former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has confirmed he'll stand as an independent at the election. In his seat in Islington in North London, he's been suspended from Labour since 2020 over the party's handling of anti-Semitism claims and was expelled today after declaring he would be running as an independent. And here are the candidates who have been selected so far for some of the bigger parties to fight in a constituency of Islington North on the 4th of July. The BBC will have a full list of candidates once nominations close. Now, let's take a look at what's on the front pages of tomorrow's papers. Well, the Mirror is leading with Michael Gove standing down in the election, with the headline, "Now Gove quits Sunak's sinking ship." The Weekend Financial Times reads, Gove quits as Tory pre-election exodus pushes past 1997 flight. The Eye is also leading on Michael Gove, saying Rishi Sunak has been hit by a record exodus. And it's a similar story on the front of the Times. Its headline, Gove quits politics as more Tory MPs stand down. Now Gove quits, reads the Daily Express, reporting the minister's shock exit rocks Tories, while the Daily Mail has an exclusive with the Shadow Chancellor, who vows she'll never play fast and loose with your money. The Daily Telegraph's headline is Chancellor Jeremy Hunt saying inheritance tax is against Tory values. Meanwhile, The Guardian is leading with Gaza after the UN top court ordered Israel to halt its assault on Rafah.